Now to the Caribbean, where the number of people killed tonight from those deadly U.S. boat strikes in the region, that number is at least 70. The death toll rising after the 17th lethal U.S. strike was carried out yesterday, targeting an alleged drug boat. Take a look at this video. It shows the ball of fire after the strike annihilated the vessel. All 3 men on board were killed. That's according to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He called the men narco-terrorists on X. He then added, to all narco-terrorists who threaten our homeland, if you want to stay alive, stop trafficking drugs. If you keep trafficking deadly drugs, we will kill you, end quote. President Trump has justified the deadly strike, saying the U.S. is in armed conflict with drug cartels. But the White House has provided very little to no evidence backing up the claims the boats are, in fact, trafficking drugs. And Democratic lawmakers are demanding answers. They claim boat strikes violate U.S. and international law. And there are also worries about the U.S. military buildup in the region overall, with the USS Gerald Ford on its way there, our biggest carrier, by the way. But efforts by Senate Democrats to curb Trump's military campaign in the Caribbean have not been successful. A second measure failing just yesterday. So where does that leave us today? For more, we are joined by Tommy Pigott, Principal Deputy Spokesperson for the State Department. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course, we're thrilled to have you. First, I want to ask, how do we know that these men were narco-terrorists? And tell me more about this latest strike.
Well, the Secretary, as he's made clear, we're very confident about the intelligence behind this strike. The Department of War can speak more to the specifics of that. But as the President has said, each one of these boats represents 25,000 American lives. 25,000 Americans that could be poisoned by the flow of deadly drugs into our country. The President has been clear that we will stop the flow of deadly drugs into our country, that we will combat these narco-terrorists, and the President is doing just that.
You mentioned that the administration trusts the intelligence. There's so many Democrats and Republicans, lawmakers on both sides, who say there's not enough transparency. Why not share the evidence with them, with fellow lawmakers?
Look, we just saw Secretary Rubio on the Hill. I'm not going to discuss intelligence further here through the media. But what I can say is, as the Secretary has said, is that we have extreme confidence in this intelligence. And it's incredibly important that we stop the flow of these deadly drugs into our country. The leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45 are overdoses, fueled by the flow of illegal drugs into our country. The President is securing the border, he's combating these narco-terrorists, and there's a whole-of-government approach to designate cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, work with our partners in the region, have security agreements, stop the era of mass migration to combat these cartels, stop the flow of these drugs, and protect the American people.
At what point does the Trump administration consider this operation a success? Again, there's been 17 strikes in September, I believe. How are you measuring success of these strikes?
Well, the President is going to stop the flow of deadly drugs into this country. And there's a whole-of-government approach to do just that. It is a national security imperative. As I mentioned, the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45 being overdoses fueled by the flow of these illegal drugs. The President has secured the border. He's worked across the government in order to establish this initiative to stop the flow of these deadly drugs and combat these narco-terrorists. That's the promise the President has made, and he is living up to that promise.
Tommy, I have faith in our intel community, but I have to ask, what happens if there is a mistake, if the administration accidentally hits a fishing boat instead?
Well, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals, but what I can say is, as the President has said, every one of those boats, 25,000 American lives potentially being poisoned by these narco-terrorists. That is unacceptable, and we are taking action to stop it.
There's been a lot of talk about possibility of regime change in Venezuela. There was even talk of a 100-hour transition plan with the Venezuelan opposition leader. Any truth to that?
We have been very clear that we are engaged in a counter-cartel operation. We have been very clear about that. The Secretary has expressed that. We've expressed that from the State Department. The President himself has expressed that. The President also recently spoke to this on 60 Minutes. We're engaged in a counter-cartel, counter-drug operation combating these narco-terrorists. That's where our focus is.
Have we had any diplomatic talks with Venezuela in the last few weeks, Tommy?
Well, what I can speak to is our diplomatic talks across the region. And there's a lot of enthusiasm across the region to combat these cartels. We are seeing security agreements being signed. We're seeing security cooperation enhanced. We're seeing other countries join us in designating many of these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. The Secretary, his first trip as Secretary of State was to our region, and he has been back multiple times to show the dedication to this region, the fact that American leadership is back in our region and that we are working with our region to stop this problem that we all face. Countries across our region are being destabilized by these cartels, and so we're coming together to work to combat these narco-terrorists.
There's one question I want to get to. I want to pivot a bit before you go. The State Department says it's more than doubled the number of non-immigrant visa. They've revoked a lot of them this year for a range of reasons, from DUIs to terrorist activity. Is there specific criteria or intelligence that triggered this? How does the department ensure this isn't being used to target people simply for their political views?
Well, fundamentally, so what we're seeing is 80,000 visas that have been revoked under this administration, 80,000, way more than the previous administration. And it's guided by the fundamental principle that every single visa decision is a national security decision. So that applies when you apply for that visa, but also when you're here. If you take action, such as breaking our laws, supporting terrorism, or action that counters the terms of your visa, things that if you had done and we had known about in advance, you wouldn't have gotten the visa, you may see that visa revoked. So those crimes that we're talking about, 16,000 approximately for DUI, we're seeing visas being revoked for theft and assault, those being the three main reasons. So we will not tolerate people, foreigners here on visas that break our laws. Being here is a privilege, it's not a right.
Tommy Pigott, I really appreciate you joining us this Friday night. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.